GM Sprinkles here with another video. Welcome back. Today we're going to take a moment and have a look at how we play our tabletop RPGs. And this here is not just going to be for the Cypher system, I'm also going to be using examples from Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I wanted to make this video because the way that I see new players come to tabletop RPGs, whether it's Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, Cypher, Pathfinder, I find that their abilities and their spells end up being exactly what they are mechanically. And I think that's the thing that we need to move away from. And we're going to use the Cypher system mindset that I spoke about in an earlier video. And if you missed that, check that over here. I'm going to start with a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition example. We're going to look at making a fighter. Their backstory is that they're an orphan, and they were adopted by a wizard who experimented on them to make them the best warrior or the best bodyguard possible. So I'm actually going to make them a battle master fighter rather than an eldritch knight, which may seem a bit crazy because we want to put that magical element, but I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. So at tier 1, the fighter gets their fighting style, and they also get second wind. So if you're not familiar with fighting style, you get to pick some abilities. So the one that's dueling gives you +2 to your damage. There's one that helps you with bows, there's one that helps you with shields, one that gives you more armor class, and there's a few others as well. The one I'm going to be talking about today, just personally my favorite when I play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, when I play a fighter, is the dueling one, where as long as you have not another weapon in your other hand is free from a weapon, you do +2 damage. I want to take a moment and think about why you get that +2 damage. So obviously the easy answer is the rule says so. But that's not very exciting or unique. So how I want to flavor this is my character does more damage, and you notice that they have a rune on their forearm, and when they pick up a weapon in their right hand, because they're right-handed, it glows. Anyone who has studied magic would know that this rune helps the warrior strike true and do more damage with more precision. And just that little flavor text there, I've just made the ability feel completely different. Rather than just being a martial ability, now it's magical somehow, with a rune on their skin, burnt in it maybe, or maybe it's just a little tattoo. Either way, that's a lot of fun in my opinion. And we can keep doing this with all the abilities, and I'm going to do this again with second wind. So you look to my character, and you see they're quite wounded, and you see that you haven't noticed this before, but you see a little tattoo coming from the top of their neck. Looks like they would extending from their chest up to the top of the neck, and it glows as they breathe in. And their wounds begin to heal and fix themselves up. And just like that, I've used second wind, but rather than just being I heal myself, it's I breathe in, and as the magic in the air enters me, it connects with my tattoo or my rune that is on my chest or neck that allows me to heal. And I think there's a lot of flavor there, and it really makes a fighter feel very different to another fighter. And this is a great roleplay moment too, because if you're meant to be magically enhanced by a wizard, you may not have a single muscle in your, well, you have to have some muscle, but you may not be very muscly or very, very tough looking fighter. And that would make sense that you wouldn't have to be, because you'd have none of your abilities would come from your martial prowess. You're just magically enhanced with runes or something like that. And I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty badass. Keeping with the theme, you could have a lightning bolt on your ankle or something, or a rune that symbolizes lightning. And when you activate that for the next round or for the next 6 seconds, you can move twice as quick. You can make twice as many actions and bonus actions. And just like that, once again, rather than just being quick, or rather than just being really efficient, you're now magical. And I think that's a really fun way to play this character, where mechanically it's all exactly the same, but we've just flavored it up. And you get the picture by this point. And at level 3 fighter, you get the superiority dice and the combat maneuvers, and you can easily flavor them with magic. You know, the dodge one, obviously you just can use the magic around you to help maneuver around attacks, and so on and so on and so on. But this doesn't just extend to abilities. Let's have a look at a draconic sorcerer with a white dragon heritage, and they cast Fireball. So mechanically, it is exactly the same as any other Fireball, and another one that might be a red dragon draconic sorcerer in the party, their Fireball is exactly the same. And to me, I feel like magic shouldn't be identical per person. Even if it is a similar spell, it should have your own character's flair, because I feel like magic is so wonderful and fantastical that having it so uniformed like this is not very exciting for me personally. One way you could change this is when your draconic sorcerer casts Fireball, instead of it being a red flaming ball that goes hurtling towards your enemies, it's white, and it puts a chill in the air. but it still burns them with its white cold flame. Now, we've combined the white draconic sorcery, so you've got the cold kind of feeling about it, even though it still does flame damage, it still has the same effects, but now it just feels so much more unique to your character, and it really fits in with that story. And I don't know about you, but I love having a unique character at the table. Maybe that's just because I like to be the center of the attention, I don't know, but that's just my thoughts. Now, my Cypher system viewers are probably thinking, wait a minute, I thought we were using the Cypher mindset. Why are we not talking about Cypher system? Don't worry, I got you covered. Let's look at a warrior in Cypher system who have taken the combat prowess and the bash ability as tier 1. Now, tell me this, players, where does that bash ability come from? Is it magical? Is it martial prowess? Do you just know where pressure points are on people so you can hit someone in a spot that will cause an effect in their pressure points and make them stunned? Or is it that you just know exactly where to hit someone in the face and makes them stunned for a moment? Or maybe you enchant your blade so subtly that nobody really notices, but the way your bash works is small amount of electricity is enough to, when you make contact with your sword, it zaps them enough to stun them. Who knows? The choices are limitless and that's all up to you. What about your combat prowess? Where does that come from? Is that martial, magic, or a skill? Very interesting to think about. I really like the idea of it that you've designed your weapon to do more damage, and that's why you get that +1 damage. So maybe you're an archer and you've designed your arrow with barbs, so then when you shoot them, it just sticks into the target and really cuts them up when it enters. Or maybe you have a sword with serrated edges, so when you stab or slash, it just really cuts through the flesh enough to do more damage and more pain to your enemies. And I think that's a really cool idea, kind of a little bit dark and creepy, but that's totally my MO personally. Or you could go with the classic magic as well, of course, and maybe you enchant your blade with your blood or something and that does more damage. Like I said, you can really... These are just some really simple examples and you can really go further and further the more creative you are, of course. And of course, we've talked about the warriors, we've talked about fighters, we've talked about sorcerers. Now it's time for adepts. Adepts, what does your onslaught look like? Is it just a blast of energy from your hand? It's like a wand and you have to like say some incantations or something like Harry Potter? Or maybe it's like my character on my Monday game, who is like a kitsune kind of character, and they summon a little fox that runs along the ground and bites their targets, and that's how the onslaught does its physical damage, and if it wants to do its mind slice, the fox kind of just jumps into their soul and attacks them from within, and does that mind slice ability. Or you want to flavor you more in a superhero fashion? Well, you could do what one of my friends did in our game that we played together. He was basically Magneto. I'm not going to try and say he was like Magneto. He was Magneto, and his onslaught was just a ball bearing he carried around with him, and he would flick it at his targets. He would use his magnetic powers to fly that ball bearing in such a way that it would hurt their targets, dealing that 4 damage. In his mind slice, you're wondering? Well, kind of a little bit more creepy. He could manipulate the iron in your bloodstream enough to hurt your brain and enough to give you a splitting headache, and that's how his mind slice worked. Really creative. And you can keep going with that. So, keeping with that Magneto-themed character, the way his fast step is that his metal boots and the metal around him he can use to push him further, and that's how he does his fast step. And I think we should be looking how to flavor these abilities and not just take them for the mechanical mumbo-jumbo. I think that's why Monty Cook has made the system like this. I think that he wanted us to have the mechanical, how it works, and we come up with the rest. And he has a bit of flavor text there, of course, so that if you do struggle to come up with how you do it or give you some inspiration, and I think that's totally fine. But I think the idea, and we should be taking this to all systems we use, is flavor these abilities, spells, whatever you call them, into a way that feels unique to your character and really make your character come alive and feel very grounded in their abilities. By just adding that flavor to it. And not that flavor that I was talking about the other week. And that's what this video is about, is using what I've learned from playing the Cypher system in other systems. And we can carry this over for GM intrusions and player intrusions as well. I'm going to start with player intrusions. It's a very nice mechanic that helps the player really take control of their character and really help them and make their character feel real and realistic and not just let everything up to the dice. Because at the end of the day, I don't think we should let the dice rule the fun. Like, I think randomness is part of the fun, but we shouldn't let the dice make all the decisions. If you are new to Cypher system or you just don't know what player intrusions are because you haven't used them, good news. I've got my Cypher system book here, and I'm going to read it to you. So, player intrusions. Player intrusions give the players a small bit of narrative control over the world. However, the world still remains in the GM's purview. You can always overrule a player's intrusion or suggest a way to massage it in so it fits better into the setting. Still, because it is indeed narrative control, player intrusion should always involve a small aspect of the world beyond the character. I punch my foe really hard is an expression of effort, or perhaps character ability. My foe slips and falls backwards off the edge is a player intrusion. Player intrusion should never be as big as a GM intrusion. They should not enter an encounter, only perhaps provide the PCs with the means to more easily end the encounter. They should not have wide-reaching or long-term effects on the settings. A way to consider this might be that the player intrusions can affect a single object, floorboard snaps, feature, that a hidden shallow spot in a stream to forward, or NPC, the vendor is an old friend. But not more than that. A player intrusion can't affect a whole village or even a whole tavern in that village. A rock can become loose, but a player intrusion can't create a landslide. That's the official description of what a player intrusion is in the Cypher System Revised rulebook on page 412. Honestly, I like it, and I like this enough to bring the mechanic to something like Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Just an example to really make this point clear. You got that wizard who's been studying arcane scrolls and magic and symbols his whole life, and you've gone into a dungeon and there's arcane symbols across the walls. Probably, unless they're of an ancient race that no longer exists or some other reason, I probably should just know those symbols and not have to roll for it. Because it makes sense for that character. Same for an investigator character who's a private investigator or a detective who's been investigating his whole life. He walks into a room and searching for clues, he should probably just find that clues. And honestly, if you're laying clues for the players, they should probably just find them because the clues are made to be found anyway, right? Of course, as long as it makes sense. And I used an example in the GM intrusion video last week about, you know, you've got your acrobatic man who wants to walk across a tightrope. And if he's done that sort of thing his whole life, then sure, don't make him roll. Maybe just let him do it. And that makes him feel so much cooler at this thing that the other players might have to roll for. And then later on, he's like, he will try and do something else, and another player will be like, oh, yeah, I can do this. I'm a crack shot with my bow. I'm just going to hit it right in the center of the target and show you how great I am at this fair. That's a really fun character moment as well. And honestly, it adds so much more flair to the story. And if you did want to use the player intrusion in a more official way in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, I've been thinking about this, and you could just use inspiration. So as long as you are giving inspiration out, you can have a player say, oh, that dish you want me to jump over? I'm going to spend my player inspiration just to succeed it. And that makes inspiration a little bit more valuable too, because honestly, I don't know about you guys, but I don't tend to use inspiration that much. And of course, the GM gets the final say anyway, so if it is alleged that you definitely don't think that they could jump, or you definitely think the player is just trying to squeeze out of an advantage out of you that you think you shouldn't get, or maybe there's something that the player's not aware about that does make it more difficult, like the ground is wet. In Monty Cook's book Arcana of Ancients, he also suggests using the GM intrusion in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition in the same way. If you do want to just interject in the story and add a complication in, then just do that and give that player 2 inspiration, 1 for themselves and 1 for another player. That way they can use that for later for rerolls and etc, etc. And I think that's a really great way to do it. Like, we can use mechanics from other systems into our favorite systems. And that is something that I'm super excited about, and going on this journey, looking at other systems in the future so we can see what we can do, find the best thing from all systems, and kind of mash them together into our own. If you did want to follow me elsewhere, you can follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, or Facebook. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you really did enjoy the video. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share to your friends. If you don't have any friends, well, just share to me, because if you're watching this, you're my friend. Have a lovely day, keep rolling those dice, but don't let them define you.